not the boxcar, but it's something probably similar to what we had at the time, and that boxcar became a Methodist church in 1875. We actually started in the boxcar probably in 1870, well, for sure, in 1874, perhaps before that. But the 1875 was the official commissioning, and it was commissioned by Reverend Joseph Nicholson, who was a pastor in Ocean Springs. So he came over here and helped get this church started. Now, the pastors of the boxcar, it starts with Reverend Joseph Nicholson in 1874. Okay, the next year, 1875, he was now superannuated. He was living in Ocean Springs, and the actual pastor was R.B. Downer, who was also pastor in 1876 as well. Now, if you're wondering what superannuated means, it's a minister who is basically semi-retired, and for reasons of health or disability, or just old age, can't really have his own appointment. He can go superannuated, kind of be a semi-retired preacher. He remains a member of the annual conference, and he has all the rights and privileges of an active minister, except that he won't have his own charge. So, we've been in the boxcar for 4 or 5 years now. I'm sure it's getting pretty old. So in 1879, Henry Ware, who was a businessman, built a building, a church, measuring 18 by 24 feet. He donates the church, the building, to the Methodist Church, and that church was dedicated Sunday, October 21st, 1880, with J.W. McLaurin as pastor. Now later, they added an addition onto it, which made it a T-shaped building, and it was eventually moved to the west end of Pine Street on the southwest corner, and it's now a private home, and it's still there. And I think it's for sale. This picture that we're looking at right here was taken at Thanksgiving in 1902, and it was presented to the church by Mrs. Lucy Quarles. Now this is just a close-up of that same picture. It'll just crop a little bit so you can see. If you look closely, I don't know how well you can see on that screen, you see the cutaway, the archway. That used to be the exterior wall of the church. If you look at the tip top of the ceiling, where the archway meets the ceiling, you see that the boards were going front to back. Then if you look beyond the archway, you see they're going left to right. That's the extension, the addition they put on the church. Pastors of the 1879 church, there were 16 pastors altogether. There's one that's not listed, and that's Reverend Sells, who was the last pastor of that church. He was only there for a short while before we added another church. So it started with J.W. McLaurin and actually ended with James L. Sells. But you see there that all of these had at least 2 or 3 churches in their charge. J.W. McLaurin, for example, had Hansborough, Bay St. Louis, and Long Beach. So he was working 3 churches at one time. And then later on down the road, you see Ocean Springs and Long Beach, Seashore and Long Beach, Bay St. Louis and Long Beach, and so forth. So they were busy. Now this information, we'll talk about this in just a second, is provided by J.B. Kane. And the way this happened is that the daughter of one of the daughters of Reverend Sells wrote J.B. Kane and asked if he could tell her who the pastors were in the Long Beach church prior to her father. And this happened in 1952. So in 1952, he responded back. And next slide is the letter. This is the actual letter that he wrote back to her. Now, if you want to know who J.B. Kane was, you've heard of J.B. Kane. He was a Methodist minister, but he was also a church historian, had a master's degree in church history. That is Juanita Sells, the daughter of Reverend Sells. And to our right, up there on that by that first post, is another little white. That's a white shirt. That's Mrs. Sells. And to her left, on the next post there, is Reverend Sells. Now, the property for this parsonage was donated by George J. Quarles. And if you look in the background on the right-hand side, that is the 1905 church. And it was very shortly after it was built, because I know that Juanita Sells was born in 1903, I think. 1903, 1904, right? 1903. So, no, that's not right. Anyway, maybe it is two. Okay. But it was about that time. So she's only 1 or 2 years old when this picture was made. Okay. This is a little better picture of the church. This was actually taken by Sun Publishing. This is the church, again under James Sells. It was dedicated in 1907 under Reverend W.T. Griffin. And if you look at it, it looks brown. And it may have been brown in the picture, but originally it was green. And the reason it was green is it was stained, not painted. And stained was cheaper than paint. And apparently green stain was the cheapest stain you could buy. So that's what they put on there. So we were known for the green church with the white trim. The next slide here shows the interior of that same church, the 1905 church. And here you see Reverend Sells, that is him. The property for this church, by the way, was donated by William Harper McCon in 1879. They inherited from their father, John J. McCon, who passed away in 1860. If you look carefully, you see the chancel rail there. You can see a little opening on the left side of the picture there. You see the chancel rail in front of the pulpit, just to the preacher's right. You see a pretty good shot of it. We still have that. It's right there. That was brought forth to the 1953 church. So if you've been in that church, that's the same chancel rail. So it's 119 years old. So we need to take care of it. Okay, next slide. The pastors of the 1905 church, there were 26 of them, starting with James Sells, ending with Fred Thompson. So we're going to move on now. The next slide. Fire destroyed the parsonage. It was built in 1904 and it burned down in 1910. So Reverend Alford was the pastor at the time, and his family was in the building when it caught fire, and they all escaped safely, but they lost all their personal belongings and they lost some church records as well. And on this slide, we see a few weeks later they had a meeting to determine where the new church, the site of the new church, the parsonage might go, and what the cost of rebuilding might be. But we didn't rebuild until 1916. And this is a picture of the 1916 parsonage, which lasted until 1959. Now, we'll move on to the Mary Abar building. The Mary Abar Memorial Sunday School building. It was completed in 1928 with donations from the church and from the community. A most generous donation was from Mary Abar, for whom the building is named. Sunday School Superintendent C.P. Gates took over for Mrs. Donovan as Sunday School Superintendent and stayed in that position for 40 years. And he was known for having the strongest Sunday school program in the Seashore District, if not the entire state, entire conference. Now, this is a picture, the next slide, of the church from the something to remember for later, not for now. If you look on the church building, you see the three windows with kind of triangular shaped window above it. That is east. That's the east wall of the church. So this church actually faced Church Street. Okay, the Mary Abar building, which is a separate building, they kind of look connected, but they're not. It also faces Church Street. And that's important because the Mary Abar buildings went to move a little later. So we're actually going to get a little ahead of ourselves in this slide. Next slide. We moved the building later, so it's now on Pine Street facing north. But we're going to come back to that in a little bit. So it was right next to the old church. Now it's 50 cents each Sunday taken from the incidentals collection to pay for church insurance. So to pay the insurance for the church is 50 cents a week. So now we're at May 9th, 1935. Next slide. This is 10 years after the first slide we looked at. Okay? 10 years later, the pastor's salary is now in arrears, $171. The presiding elder's salary in arrears, $22. The chairman of the survey committee states not a wheel has been turned. This is Great Depression time, and we're not able to pay the salary for the preachers. 4 months later, September 5, 1933, Reverend Lewis offers to deduct $20 off his salary if we would just pay him his back pay, pay him in full for his back pay. So he needed his money. 4 months later, we were behind $171. We were probably behind even more 4 months later. Okay, next slide. This meeting of May 29, 1940, once again addresses salaries. This is 5 years later than the slide before. It was decided to create a list of members not paying the preacher. Names will be divided among the stewards who will meet with members to urge them to pay the preacher's salary. We're kind of getting a common theme here. We've been going on for 10 years. Well, it was 1940. The first slide was 1925. We still can't pay the preacher's salary. Now, we're kind of reaching the breaking point here. This is October 8th, 1940. We're well into the Depression. This is 4 months after the preceding slide. Okay? It says, during discussions of next year's budget, it was decided not to make an every member canvass at this time, not the psychological time for it. So you saw that what we've been doing, we get up the list, go out, and they kind of pressure to pay up. They said we just can't keep doing it, we can't do it again. So they decided to keep the preacher's salary the same as it was the year before. Now, this slide, November 11, 1941, is a budget report. It's pretty simple. Budget paid in full, cash in hand, $26. Now, the Great Depression is beginning to come to an end, but in 26 days, the Japanese are going to bomb Pearl Harbor, and we're going to go into a war footing. Just 26 days from the day of this report. So this slide, next slide, is a list of men on the church roll. This is November 4, 1945. And we're at the end of the war. In fact, the war is actually over. It's been over for about a month. Okay, this is on a single sheet of paper just stuck in the book, which a lot of papers were just individual papers. But there's no other documentation as to what this was about, so we don't really know. But it was November, it's Thanksgiving time, near Thanksgiving, Christmas is approaching. The war actually ended 1 month earlier on September 2nd. So perhaps they were looking to identify the military families who had members overseas and try to help them out while they're waiting for their loved ones to come home. This is the top of that list. These are people that they believed to be local, that they knew where they were at church. Okay, this is the bottom half of the page. The men of the church roll who had either moved out of town or were in the service. Now, if they're out of town, remember we've just gone through the Depression, they may have left for work, and their families still lived here, or they were in the service. Actually, 22 men had moved or were out of town, and 23 of them were listed as in the service. And there were probably more than that just were not included on the list. Okay, the next church renovations. We're leaving the Book of Stewards. Okay, this is the renovations budget. It's really going to look more like a painting and redecorating budget. But what happened is, Mrs. Eloise Parks, in the summer of 1938, who didn't own a car, didn't drive a car, walked door to door selling magazine subscriptions, and made a grand total of $10 in profits toward the painting and redecorating. It was put into a fund, the Women's Society of Christian Services. 4 years later, in 1942, there were several $100s in that fund. So the ladies called Mr. Vincent Smith, who was an architect, and wanted to get started on the painting. And he said, ladies, you don't want to paint, you want to put up a Celotex wallboard. Well, they didn't have money for Celotex wallboard, so they went back to fundraising with a vengeance. Now, in the meantime, we're up to 1946. Remember, she started in 1938, and we're in 1946. Now, Reverend W.T. Magnet was here, and one of his big priorities was youth ministries, children and youth ministries. So he doubled the youth program in the church. Now they were needing more space for those activities. So, next slide. We changed the plan from a redecorating plan to a building project. So the discussion of the new church building was first addressed to the Board of Stewards on March 24th, 1947. The redecorating project became a building project. Now, the plan was that Mr. Smith devised was that they would connect a new sanctuary to the existing 1905 church. Okay? They would then take the 1905 church and renovate it, add a second floor, and change its configuration to provide 18 Sunday school classrooms. And this was going to cost $30,000. Now, this plan would require the Mary Haybar building to be moved. That's when it was moved across the street. And that happened around April 1949. Now, Mr. Fred Skelly donated salvage lumber for the building. Mr. Watkins was an electrician, and he helped supervise the wiring of the building, the new construction. So donated labor and materials came from Methodists, but it also came from the entire community, the Baptists, the Presbyterians, all over the community. So it was quite an ecumenical project. So, let's kind of go back over it. Build a new sanctuary, attach it to the south side of the 1905 church. In 1950, the new sanctuary part, they called it an auditorium in the plans. So that was completed in 1950. Now meanwhile we were in the old church having service. 1950 we move into the new part. Now remember, think of it as only having like 3 walls because it's supposed to be connected to the new church. Okay? So now we're in the new church sanctuary, and the old church renovation begins. They haven't touched it because we were still having church in it. So a second floor, then they're going to add a second floor, renovate it. Okay? But then, next slide, if I can get it to come. There's a change of plans. What happened? Okay, I'm going to show you a document in a few minutes here, but I'm going to read you a quote from the document in February 1950. It says, by careful inspection, using straight chalk lines and plumb bobs, it was found that the old building was more in the shape of a pumpkin than a building, and it was determined that it would be less expensive and less hazardous to wreck the old building and rebuild than try to alter and remodel. So the trustees decided they wanted to take this route, but they did not have permission to take this route. But in April of 1950, they were given that permission. So the new sanctuary was completed and occupied. They're going to start tearing down the old church. Okay? The construction was interrupted several times because we didn't have enough money. Remember, we were planning on building a whole new Sunday school building. We were just going to renovate it. But a new organization, Methodist Men's Club, provided an influx of money and labor, and so we were able to complete the project in June 21st, 1953. And that is the church that's sitting right across the way here. The actual cash outlay did turn out to be $30,000. All the rest of it came from donations of labor or materials. And this is what that church looks like. Now, if you notice, if you look across the back, you see the roof line across the back. That was supposed to be the 1905 church. But they ended up tearing it down, and that building was put there. So the whole thing was probably good for us that our church here, that one wasn't tied to a 1905 building. Now, 6 years later, 7 years later, in 1960, a vestibule was added. So if you look at this picture, that's still up, still up there. You'll see two white pillars out there. Eventually, those are going to be the two corners of the building, right here. Next slide. You see now that the vestibule was added in front. Okay, and then the next slide is what it looks like today. Same building. Okay, the next slide. These are the stained glass windows from 1953. Now, Mary Ellen Alexander writes that when they were building this, they had this part of the church pretty much completed, but they had no windows. There weren't any windows for the building, so they couldn't move in. So she was given the job of picking out windows, I'm sure with a committee or group of people, and also finding a way to fund them. So she got donations and said that each person could sponsor a window, or a family could sponsor a window. So there are family sponsors, or a group of sponsors, not necessarily families, that sponsor each of these windows. There are 8 of them in the sanctuary and 2 more out in the vestibule. Next slide. The history of the rebuilding of the Long Beach Methodist Church by L.H. Coker. That's where the public came from. Okay. Now, this is L.H. Coker was on the administrative board. I think he might have even been the chairman of the executive board at that time. But he wrote this 11-page document that takes you through it's an account of the entire project of the 1953 church, starting with Eloise Parks and her $10 fundraiser, all the way to completion of the church. It's 11 pages, it's extremely well written. I haven't told you, there's really 2 documents we have here. One is the slideshow, and the other there's a written document. The written document is about 160 pages, and it has a lot of these documents in it, like the complete documents in it. It's not in the slideshow, but it is in the document. So next slide, we're going to move on to the Reverend H.J. Moore Education Building, otherwise known as Moore Hall. It was built in 1963. I didn't have a lot of information. I think this is about the time my 6 books were run out. So there may be more information beyond this that we can gather. But basically, we built the building. I can tell you a little bit about Reverend Henry Jackson Moore. That he served Long Beach as pastor in 1937 to 1939. During his career, Brother Moore served 22 different charges, attended annual conference in 17 different towns. On retirement, he moved back to Long Beach, where he lived on Pine Street, adjacent to the this letter was written saying that we've had a dream for a long time for a new sanctuary for the First United Methodist Church of Long Beach. We elected a committee to develop a preliminary plan. And on the back of this letter is some drawings of the plan. But first, that's only the top of the letter. I'll take you to the next portion of the letter. Try to blow it up so you can read it. I still don't know if you can read it here, but you'll be able to read it on your own computer if you want to pull this up. They said we had to do three things. We had to get charge conference acceptance, and we had to get church conference acceptance, and then we had to raise $697,000. And the last two paragraphs there saying, now we have to do that while still maintaining all of the funding and projects that we do as a church. So on the next slide, there are several. The top picture here is the elevation of the church. It shows you what the outside of the church looks like, which you all recognize. The next one is a transept, or it's kind of like an MRI of the church, looking into the church is what it would look like. Then the next slide is a picture of the church before all the shrubs and trees grew up around it. Okay, this building was completed in 1985 and consecrated in November 1987. And the bottom of that letter to the church, had this floor plan. Now, the floor plan looks nice, but it looks a lot better on the next slide. So when this building was completed, Reverend Huffman was the pastor. And where's Marcia? She here? Okay. Her daughter is Marcia, his daughter is Marcia Bishop, who's still with us today. Now, this is from, we still have the original program from the 1987 church consecration. This is, we pulled out a few things from that program, because it's really hard to read. So I'm not even going to try to read that to you right now. But we have the complete program if you go to the, I call it the book. I don't know what else to call it. The other thing. Okay? So we've gone through, go to the next slide, Andy. So here you can see that Robert Huffman, Reverend Marlowe, Louise Hill, Martha Houston, and all these, Jane Hamrick, and so forth, Lori Dunn. Now, these are pictures from the 100th year anniversary. Is that right? 25 years ago. This is 25 years ago. So, of course, you can see Reverend Horton, you can read it. It's Wayne Roberts, who was the chairman of the executive committee, and Dr. Jingles, who was the chairman of the building committee. Thank you, Dr. Jingles. The choir, on the top right, bottom left, we have the children's choir. We have Joyce St. John from the church ladies organization, and Mabel Skelly, who was from the Historical Society of Long Beach with the new historical marker. And then during the consecration, we had some instrumentalists as well. Okay, now we go to a different section, the music ministry. Turns out we have a lot of information on the music ministry. I can tell you that Miss Allie Quarles Toomer was the organist in 1890 to 1895. And Edith Dearman, I think we mentioned her earlier, was choir director in 1931, William Morgan in 1933. I won't go through all these, but I am going to show you a couple of them. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, Mandy. The top of here is kind of interesting. The preacher suggested putting music into the choir, for the choir, into the budget. Mandy, I'm sure you appreciate that one. The second one, Mr. Danielson, the chairman of the board of stewards, has arranged to have the church piano tuned. And next month the bill came in, it cost $3.50 to tune the piano. Yeah, multiply that by about 75 maybe now to get it done. Okay, next one. The organ committee report on Baldwin and Hammond organs. We're looking for an organ for the church. They that came up four more times before it was finally approved. And on this slide, February 19th, 1958, we purchased a Baldwin organ for $2,824, of which we only had $1,852 in cash. So we borrowed $972 from Hancock Bank to pay for the organ. Now during this time, the members who wanted an organ, they were allowed to start an organ fund, but they were not allowed to solicit funds for the organ because for fear of taking away from other church activities that were deemed more important than the organ. So they finally got the money and made the purchase. It took several years to pay that off, I think. Okay, that's all we need for this one. Here, let's go on to the next slide, January 21. And this is a nice problem to have, the very first one. We actually bought a new piano, a smaller piano, because we needed more room in the old church sanctuary to add more pews. So we bought a smaller piano so we could push it further back up into the pulpit area and add 7 rows of pews. Now, this is provided by Mandy Long, the next list here. You got that, Mandy? Okay, you see, people at Wantley Corley served as choir director from 1963 to 1985. I'm not going to read all this to you. You can look at it later. But here we keep going. And let me just stop and say we've had an incredible group of musicians come through this church. And the choir is wonderful. The musicians like Jane Cockrell and Barbara Grice, Martin Houston, unbelievable musicians. We've been very, very blessed with our music program. And of course, it ends with Mandy Long, who hasn't ended yet, 1928 to present. That's a long time, too. Okay, church ministry. You still with me, Mandy? Church ministry over the years. And I don't really need to read these, but my 22-member puppet team. This goes back a long time. Sacred Liturgical Dance Group, Moms and Tots Group, Praise for Children, Schools and Teachers, Handbell Choir, Glory Bees, Ladies Vocal Ensemble, the Men's Group with Ruth Vocal Ensemble, the Kitchen Band. Next slide, Contemporary Worship Group with instrumental music, which I think evolved into the Well, the Mountaintop Outreach Program, MYF, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Next slide, Backpack Buddies, Children's Choir, Vacation Bible School, the Gulf Coast Young People's Union, 1935, the Oaks, the Side-by-Side Respite Ministry, Grief Counseling, United Methodist Women, the Methodist Men's Club, organized in 1952, the United Methodist Men, Sunday School Discipleship Groups, Silver Foxes, Ladies Bible Study. Now, this is really small. I know you can't read this. Going back to the Long Beach Young People's Division is a member of the Gulf Coast Young People's Union, which meets each month on Friday night before 4th Sunday. All young people are urged to attend these meetings. They are very inspirational and helpful. 1935. Okay, and we have some pictures that were brought to us from the Girl Scouts. More Girl Scouts. Mountaintop. More Mountaintop. More Mountaintop. And then we'll stop here for a second. This is another nice picture of this beautiful building. Now, these are the 3 windows, the stained glass windows, but it's also an introduction to another section. In the Conference Journal, Southeastern Journal, You know, they come through our lives and here, especially back in the day, they were only here 2 or 3 years and they left, and another one comes in 2 or 3 years and he leaves. We don't realize their entire career. They may have been, like Reverend Moore, in 20, 25 churches. They may have served 50 years, or in his case, 63 years, I think it was. So we don't see the whole picture of their career, and they're written extremely well. Most of it by J.B. King, about half of them or so. But they're really something to see. Now, have you ever called me back there? Yes. You want to bring that up here real quick? I'm going to show you why he's bringing this up here. Next slide. Does anybody recognize that? Anybody know what that is? Pardon? But you know the significance of it? I wonder, we've asked a few people. I read a little bit about this. Thank you. Okay. I came across this in reading on this. I asked a few people, and I was kind of surprised. Nobody seemed to know about this. Okay? So, I'm going to read you one more thing, and then I'll stop reading stuff. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, Muriel Alexander writes this. Okay, each family brought their own kerosene lamp to hang on the post at the end of the family pew in order to light the church for the service. Doug Henry loaned this little lamp to bring to show you today. This is one of the lamps that fit on the end of the pews in the old church building in order to light the church. His grandmother had kept it, as it was her responsibility to keep the lamp chimney clean. Perhaps they had family pews in those days, and the lamp was on the end of the dining pew. Shortly after the electricity was installed in the church, and the lamp, believed to be the personal lamp of Miss Donovan, so it may date back to the Boxcar Church in 1875 or even 1874. In any case, we know she kept the lamp, and it must have been precious to her. It remained in her family until her grandson, A.D. Hendon, donated the lamp to the church in 1999. The lamp is likely the oldest relic of this church, and it should be properly cared for and maintained and displayed. So I truly think whether you believe it was brought in, carried in and out, or whether you believe it was on pew or hanging on the wall, I think we have photographic evidence it's hanging on the wall in two different churches. You know, it is part of our church history that dates back to the very, very beginning. So this is a picture of the lamp right behind me, with the altar Bible. Thank you. That's it.
I have a comment. You had apologized for reading to us, but I don't feel read to at all. I really feel like you're a storyteller, and that you just told us this incredible story. So thank you so much, not only for the incredible amount of work that went into this, but just for sharing it with us so eloquently.
Well, thank you. You're quite welcome. Every time this will shortly be, as soon as Brandy and I get back together again. And again, I thank Brandy for her work and Reverend Coleman, and tonight for Ms. Woodruff as well. For Mary, thank you. So this will be online somewhere on the church. And remember, this is the shorter version of I think it's about 160 something pages book that contains more detail than this. A whole lot of that is all of those 18 ministers. I really urge you to read those. I didn't write it. I wrote very little of it, 160 pages. I just collected it, got it in the right order, and tried to explain and connect it together. The goal, which I didn't mention in the beginning, prior to this, the histories that were done every 25 years were about 4 pages, and they kept repeating the same 4 pages every 25 years. No pictures, just text. So my goal was to bring the actual documents, the pictures, the primary sources, the secondary sources, to where you can really kind of see the life of the church evolve over time. So I hope I accomplished that to some degree. But it will be on, eventually both documents will be on the website where you can pull it up and look at it.
When we were at Mandy's the other day, exchanging this information, we mentioned, my brother had told us, David, about a window that was in the Sunday school building, and the old Sunday school building. And she and her husband and son were able to go up in the attic. And I don't know if you have that picture, Mandy, because we really suspect, Jim, did you have that? Mandy, to
It's that window on the top. I don't have a picture in the slide.
Karen said they stepped on it when they were
Yeah,
out.
well, it's like it was a dirt insulation and everything, and they had raccoons living up there. That's when Gary, my wife was here, and he decided he was gonna go up there and shoot him with a pellet gun, and he left me. I figured, if you're gonna shoot him, we're gonna go down, and hear you scream, we'll know what's happening.
Yeah.
But, we found it, I said, what is all, I thought it was multiple stained glass windows, they were one.
And it's just clear glass, I think.
No, I think it's some stained glass.
Did it have some?
It's clear glass.
It's clear?
It's clear glass.
I think it's clear glass. Based on these pictures.
If you go up, you call, right when you turn the stairs, there's a closet door right there. That's the only way in that attic, and I weigh 40 pounds less, and I barely get through that hole.
And the third thing to remember is that we have the chancel rail from the 1905 church as well. And it's over in the home.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like, Mary's a story, we could not, I told Carolyn and Jim about it, but they never could find any documentation of it, about a fire.
But now, okay, here's the legend, okay? So, and this was what I was told in confirmation by Jessica Beer, okay? Who was the youth director at the time when I was in like fifth, sixth, and seventh grade. And she said that at one point there was a fire in the sanctuary. She did not say which sanctuary or when. But I'm imagining, you know, all those little lanterns that they brought. And that, that rail had to be replaced. And if you actually look at it, there's one, and I'm saying portable, that might not be the right word, but there's one portable that is different. And she said that was the remaining portable, and that somebody built the rest of the rail to match it. And if you go in there and look at it, you can still see, like, that portable is different from the rest of it.
That was not, we looked for that information, because we've talked about it before. We couldn't find that in the Book of Stewards. Our aunt is, David, how old is Aunt? Aunt 80-something, and we asked her if she was in this church. She was Elaine Skelly's daughter, and she didn't remember anything. So we don't know, except they did talk in the Book of Stewards about people donating